this chance at seeing you.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Cranky Curmudgeon Corner. My name is Paul Thomas, and this evening we are going to discuss Congress. With us tonight, Pat Chesbrough, Thaddeus Polhemus, and Mike Bernard. In 1215, a group of English nobles decided that the tyrannical rule of King John was becoming so intolerable that his power needed some restrictions. So they forced him to sign the Magna Carta, which established Parliament. Initially, Parliament was only comprised of nobles, but as time went on, elected representatives from the various counties served in another body within Parliament called the House of Commons. With the House of Commons combined with the initially established House of Lords, Parliament became a bicameral institution. As more time moved on, the power of the House of Lords gradually diminished until it became primarily ceremonial, as the House of Commons took on all governing responsibilities. That's what happened in the UK. When the American government was formed in 1787, the Constitution followed the same bicameral legislative model as the British, with the upper body taking the ancient Roman name of Senate, which had 2 members from every state appointed by that state's legislature, while the lower body, called the House of Representatives, was apportioned according to the population of the districts of the states from which they were located. So, states with larger populations had more representatives than states with smaller populations. But every state has 2 senators, regardless of population. Herein lies the problem we face with our lack of democratic governance. As stated in an earlier episode, there are 15 states, 15, with 2 Republican senators whose total population equals the population of 1 state, California, with 2 Democratic senators. Already starting out with a 30-2 scorecard deficit in terms of representation by the people, our Senate does not follow the British model of the House of Lords being mostly ceremonial. Every piece of legislation has to pass the Senate, most of which requires 60% majorities. Polls show most Americans want police reform, women's reproductive rights, background checks for gun ownership, voting rights, higher taxes for corporations and billionaires, and a lot of other things that can't get past a 50-50 Senate operating with a 30-2 deficit in terms of population representation. Are you willing to admit that the framers of the Constitution completely blew this government by the people concept with the way they constructed the power of the Senate? Thaddeus, are you willing to admit it at this point that they blew it?
No.
Okay. Why?
That's the short answer. Well, the Senate was a good move in service originally, intentionally, as a check and balance. Everything that they put in the Constitution about our government was it had to be checks and balance. Nobody had an absolute final say until everybody went around and around and agreed to everything. What was not envisioned by the Senate, and people in 1787 or whenever they devised this, whichever year it was, probably never envisioned the Senate as actually halting legislation as it does now. Years ago, the idea is it was supposed to slow down legislation. It was to give everybody a chance to look at the details and make sure that everything was right. All the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted before it actually gets voted for. What they were assuming was that the people who were going to serve in the Senate were honorable, honest and of goodwill and doing service to their country. That doesn't seem to be the case now. It's not something, it wasn't a mistake that the framers made. It's that society changed in such a way that we have a lot of people of ill will sitting in seats in the Senate.
Okay, Pat, people of ill will is the reason why we have this problem, not because the framers screwed it up. Is that, do you agree with that?
Well, I think there's definitely people of ill will. I'm not sure the framers ever intended it to be that everybody got the vote. I mean, we know that very few people could vote in that area. I mean, I looked at the census from 1790 and Virginia had 747,000 people, 292,000 of them are slaves. And of course they didn't vote. And 116 or 215,000 of those people were women. They couldn't vote either. So I don't think they necessarily intended for it to be representative. They wanted the power and they did that. So I think we do have a problem with people of ill will. I think we have a problem with the fact that even if you agree with something that the other party promotes, you're not going to vote for it because of whatever party pressures or whatever. But certainly it's not serving us well at this point in time. And I'm from one of those states that we have only 2 senators and a representative. So, and we have 750,000 people compared to California or New York, who have millions of people. So,
yeah, those 15 states, I counted Alaska as one of them.
Yeah.
So, Mike, Thaddeus says that the framers did not anticipate the ill will. We have ill will now. So my question is, did they make a mistake in not anticipating ill will, or what do you think about that?
No, I think the concept is sound itself, as in other words, like how they framed everything. But like anything, people can abuse power, abuse the power they have in a framework that is laid out in a certain way. Now, I'm envisioning, you've probably seen memes of either the Statue of Liberty or Jesus Christ doing this. That's what I could imagine some of the framers today, if they were able to see what was going on in the Senate now. I'm thinking of, when we talk about the ill will, I mean, it's just like outright stated. It's like, we're going to do everything we can to block the other party, and we're going to make sure that so-and-so is going to be a one-term president. Not, oh, we want to get infrastructure done, and we want to get this done for the American people, and we want to do this thing, and we want to protect our citizens. It's very clear that abuse of power is in place. So I don't think it's the framers' fault. I think it's those abusing the power that's at fault in this.
Oh, well, let me before we leave this question, let me ask this then. The senators were not even voted by the people. They were appointed by the state legislatures. And that occurred all the way till the 20th century before they changed that. Now, this way that they set this up, where the senators were appointed by the state legislators, there was only 2 per state, no matter how small. Is that really democratic? With your definition of democracy, I'm going to go with you first, Mike. Was this the way they set the Senate democratic?
I think as part of the whole, in other words, the idea of having the House of Representatives represented by a proportion of population, and then a check of the Senate, I think so. It seems like in general, again, the concept when it was written seems like it would work. But yeah, if it was just the Senate by itself, if we were a unicameral body and it was just the Senate with 2 representatives per state, then yeah, definitely not.
Thaddeus, is the way they set up the Senate democratic?
Well, it didn't turn out to be democratic. I suspect that when there were 13 colonies turning into 13 states, they looked at that and there wasn't that big a divergence in population from state to state back in those days. And they just kind of assumed that the states would grow apace with one another and would still be, somewhat comparable, if not exactly comparable. They never envisioned the idea that we would have Alaska with less than 1 million up north of California with 55 million or something like that. They had no idea how unequal the states would grow to be over the next couple of centuries. So it might have been intentionally democratic at the time, but I don't think it was intentionally undemocratic. It just grew that way.
Last word on this issue, Pat, about it being democratic, the way the Senate is constructed.
Well, actually, there was I think there was quite a large difference in populations from 59,000 in Delaware to 747,000 in Virginia. I know Virginia was West Virginia too at that point, but so there was kind of a large population. I wondered whether it had anything to do with not democracy, but the protection of those states that didn't have a lot of slaves to add into their number.
Because those slaves were counted as 3/5.
That's right.
Entering the workforce in the 70s and starting a family a few years after getting married, Bobby and I immediately realized that the days of a single income sustaining a household were long gone for people like us. We both had to work. And even with that, our jobs didn't pay enough to keep us out of debt. Providing our kids with quality supervision with one of us at home and not working, or paying for a trustworthy daycare was a tremendous challenge. 50 years later, it has yet to get any better. It took the pandemic to finally get the issue out in the open. The Build Back Better agenda could fix that problem permanently. Is this something that Manchin, Sinema, and the Republicans in the Senate can't see? Or is there another reason why pre-K and subsidized daycare can't be supported? Pat, what do you think? They don't see it, or is there something else going on?
I don't see how you could not see it. I mean, Joe Manchin is from a very, very poor state where people are unhealthy and the kids are behind. I think they're playing who's the boss. I think they're really enjoying their power. And I don't think there's necessarily any reason, and this is one of the concerns with Congress in general. I don't think there's any reason for many of the things that they do. I'm not sure they're considering the issues. I'm not sure they throw all the way up. Oh, what about the cost? Well, we do not have a good way to predict the cost or to assess the cost of what the problem is right now of inadequate childcare and no pre-K when we don't have kids prepared for school for sure. And then, I don't know. So I think they probably know. I think they're just playing a game.
Okay, playing a game, Thaddeus. Sinema, Manchin, and the Republicans don't see how pre-K education and subsidized daycare can help our nation.
Well, these senators probably are intelligent enough to know that these programs could be of benefit to the people. However, they have been, as Pat said, playing a game here, and they have been aided and abetted by every arm of media in the country, because there has been a glaring omission in all of the publicity about the Build Back Better bill. And that is that the spending of the $3.2 trillion or 3.5 is
It's
going
down to 1.9 now.
It's down to 1.9, but it's still $1.9 trillion. And it's going to be spent all by Christmas this year, right? If you have listened to Fox News, if you have listened to MSNBC, if you've listened to PBS, if you've read the New York Times, no matter what you're reading or listening, nobody has bothered to mention that it is a 10-year spending bill. And Manchin and Sinema have taken that situation that people don't know that it's a 10-year spending bill, and they're just freaking out over the big price tag. And some good person did a little bit of arithmetic and said, okay, this is $3.5 trillion amounts to $350 billion per year, or this is going to be $170 billion per year, as opposed to the $750 billion, $770 billion that we spend on defense.
The military, yes.
The military. And that comes to $7.75 trillion over 10 years. Now, why doesn't anybody get upset about that amount of spending? And something that is less than a third of it, everybody's up in arms. We just can't have a bill that has, we can't have a bill that has free pre-K or subsidized childcare. We just can't afford that $1 trillion boogeyman number. And they've played that game like a Steinway.
Yeah, well, thank God we have the coroner here to set the math right in front of everybody's eyes. So, Mike, what do you think about that? I think Thaddeus came up with a very intelligent way to take a look at the reality of the situation. Let's do the math. What do you think?
Oh yeah, it's all about perspective. And the bits about the media for sure, just glomming onto things and going crazy with it is always a concern. I want to get to a word though that was in the question that really for me is the backbone of what I think about it, the word agenda. The Republican Party has an agenda to make the Democrats look bad and to get rid of Joe Biden. So they're not going to support much of anything. You might get the occasional senator or two or three or representative 2 or 3 on the Republican side helping with the Democratic bill. But otherwise, they're out to get the Democrats. Manchin, I was reading a little bit, a couple articles here and there recently on this, and his biggest fear is losing the fossil fuel industry and jobs for West Virginia constituents, not the whole United States. So in other words, it's a smaller, more narrow view is what it seems. Now on that side, the other thing we're talking about is spreading this over 10 years, and I got a little more on the agenda of it, is what about the revenue that these will raise? In other words, will it pay for itself? Maybe, maybe not. Will it get close? We don't know. But the fact it's going to generate economic activity, which will generate tax revenue and should at least pay for some of this. And it doesn't matter. It seems like in the past, Republicans didn't care about deficits for their pet things. So why are they up in arms about it now? Is my thought. Kyrsten Sinema is a little bit more of a mystery to me. Again, I read a Washington Post article recently. It was saying that another representative she was talking to was able to kind of coax out of her that she had several priorities, which seemed reasonable, like tax credit for renewable energy, child tax credit, and paid leave. But she also doesn't want corporate or personal taxes to be raised. So there's a bit of a, a little bit of a, I'm trying to think of the right word. Okay.
Contradiction, paradox.
Conflict, contradiction. Thank you so much.
All right.
And yeah, so that, and the thing is that she's naturally coy anyway. So people think she's, what's she trying to do? What's she trying to pull? I don't know. That's the thing. She's keeping whatever she's saying or whatever she's thinking close. We don't know. And that's frustrating.
But it is wrong for one or two people think that they can dictate the outcome of this process.
Bernie Sanders hasn't been shy about voicing his displeasure with the aforementioned Democratic senator's mansion and cinema. House progressives clearly don't trust them, as evidenced by the squad's vote against the grand bipartisan infrastructure achievement until they see mansion and cinema votes for the human infrastructure reconciliation bill. I heard that today they're going to be voting, the House is going to be voting on this reconciliation, human infrastructure, Build Back Better. Good luck in the Senate. Meanwhile, other prominent leaders, including Biden, are very reluctant to say anything negative about these two obstructionists. Is the tradition of congeniality proving to be counterproductive, and should more Democrats quit playing nice to these two narcissists? Mike, I'm going to let you start out with that question.
Oh, yeah, I like that. I have a feeling it might already be happening behind the scenes, but I would say don't display your dirty laundry, because that could give the Republicans fodder to say, "Oh, look at those Democrats! They can't do this and that." So I have a feeling behind the scenes there's more pressure going on about the playing nice. I know Joe Biden's all about diplomacy, and so sometimes you have to, even though you want to bitch slap somebody. If they have something that you want, you have to be a little nicer than that. And so I have a feeling he's trying to be more diplomatic behind the scenes with the hope that they'll come to some agreement.
Pat, playing nice, is it working?
Well, here's the thing, and I've thought about this a lot, So the Republicans strong arm everybody into doing what they want. This is not how I believe the Democrats normally operate, at least in my experience as a Democrat. That's not the way. Maybe we should a little bit more, but we do not say, if you don't do this, we're going to primary you, you're going to blah, 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 we're going to badmouth you. We don't do that as Democrats. And my issue really is all of those Republicans that don't even give it a chance. I mean, I'm not for Manchin, and I don't think that's good for them to do, but it's the others that are the problem. It's not just those two. It's the other, 49 or whatever the heck, the number 48 other people, including my people, who don't support this stuff. And they do it as a block. And I just read someplace that somebody from Alabama is now taking credit for the infrastructure bill that he didn't vote for. And that's exactly what happens all the time. They hold them in that lockstep thing. And I don't want to be a Democrat that isn't allowed to think for myself. Now, I disagree with those guys. I'm not saying I don't, but I just feel like, how do we want to look at the world?
Okay, well, if we continue to play nice with voting rights, we may not have much to be talking about, in 2 to 4 years anyway.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
That is play nice. Pat doesn't want to start acting like Republicans because they're pretty despicable. And I agree with that. Republicans are despicable, so we shouldn't really act like them, but have we been too nice as Democrats?
Me?
Yes, Thaddeus.
Oh, thank you.
Did you mention? Yeah, I mentioned your name earlier in my diatribe.
But, was in there somewhere. Anyway, well, I think I'm in the middle ground between Pat and Mike. on this because, of course, these two senators are playing their position for every bit of mileage they can get out of it because it is press for them. The people in their home states are saying, oh, look, there's our senator and he's fighting blah, blah, blah. And, so they can hope for votes, right? Well, the only thing they have going for them is the threat that they will vote against this bill. Now, if they vote against this bill, a whole lot of people in their home states are going to find that there are benefits that we're not going to get. And there are things that are not going to happen that we were all hoping for because our senator voted no. I don't think that that will play well at their reelection time. I just have a feeling that the other senators can be as congenial as they want because the people who have the ultimate power are the people who are going to pull the levers for them when it's time for them to be reelected. And they know that. So as much blowharding as they are doing now about, we have to change this, we have to take this out. And I'm not really sure if I'm going to vote for this. When it's time to vote, they'll vote for it, or it's going to be their last term. And they know it. And we know it too.
Okay, Thaddeus, you're expressing a lot of faith in the electorate, seeing the reality and doing the right thing based on that reality. I hope you're right. The debate over the filibuster is becoming very heated. One side says the need for bipartisanship makes the filibuster a necessary tool for our democracy. Joe Manchin actually said that if we lose the filibuster, we lose our democracy. That's an actual quote. This statement was issued a few weeks before Manchin's voting rights bill was defeated in the Senate by a Republican filibuster. Given the current state of the Republican cult, what do you say the filibuster represents to America? What's the filibuster to America now, Pat?
It's obstruction, total obstruction. Doesn't mean it's against every other thing we do in this country, that if you win by one vote, you win. And it is, and the reality is, I read that originally it was to ensure deliberation. Well, enough time for deliberation. Well, they don't even deliberate anymore. They just said, we're going to do this. And we should at least make them stand up and talk for 6 hours or whatever the heck it is, in my opinion, and say something or don't say anything or whatever. But it's really destructive, I think. And one of the things that I did in preparation was read a little thing called Reclamation of the U.S. Congress that was written a few years ago from a university with a university grad class. And they're talking about maybe to change the filibuster, they should start just diminishing the requirement. So instead of 60%, maybe it should be 55%. And then, so move it down so that it gets down to actual 50% plus one, and do it that way. But it's certainly not doing what it was originally intended to do. And it's just ridiculous that we have to have 60 votes in order to pass anything in that Senate.
Well, maybe it was intentionally designed to promote Jim Crow. But
could be.
Mike, Pat had a very strong opinion about what the filibuster is. What's your opinion?
Me, for my part, in this little 10 by 10 part of America, I think the filibuster is the best tool for the minority to control everybody else. That's what they do. They can just take a stranglehold on anything that they don't want. And right now, anything that the other party wants is what they don't want. And so we get nothing done. Well, we know why they do that. They want to make the Democratic Party look bad, so people will vote for Republicans instead next time. So, it's a benefit to the people. Is it a benefit to the people, or is it discrediting the opposition that they want to do? Well, it's pretty obvious. They're only, the only plank in their platform is discrediting the other party. We don't want to get anything done. That's about it.
Mike, initially when you were talking earlier about what the Republicans wanted, which Thaddeus just reaffirmed here, I was thinking that what the Republicans want to do is make the lives of the voters so miserable as they can, so they can blame it all on Biden, blame that misery on Biden and the Democrats. And that's how they're acting. Let's stop everything good, make it miserable so we can blame Biden and you can elect us, which Thaddeus just said. So the filibuster, Mike, what's your take on that?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's just another tool to abuse power. Plain and simple. And it's a shame. But that's what it is now. It has nothing to do with, let's take more time to deliberate, or this is such an important bill. We really need the backing of a lot more people. Let's really just take care. It's nothing like that at all. It's just like you all said. Nope. Let's use it to club the Democrats over the head again, that type of thing, or whatever it is. But yeah, it definitely is. I think it's just it feels like it turned into a monster from its original intent, based on the way it's being abused.
The House Select Committee on the January 6th insurrection has been in the news a lot. Just recently with Steve Bannon, they're talking about Mark Meadows now. How much effect do you think this investigation will ultimately have in preserving our democracy? Mike, what kind of faith do you have in this January 6th investigation led by Congressman Benny Thompson?
Depends on what those in power do with the information they receive. Is it going to actually color policy in the future where they can shore up security, where they can teach Capitol Police and other protective bodies to learn from the experience to thwart a second attack of some sort? Or is it going to be buried by those in power because, we're already saying it was just a tour, the tourists were there. So, I'm not 100% optimistic right now because of the Republican Party's presence. They're constantly playing it down. Oh, they were just tourists walking around that day, and all that kind of other BS, which just infuriates me that they would do that. And now I remember that one poor cop, Michael Fanone, who said that same thing, saying the fact that those Republicans were demeaning every single thing they did to try to protect the Capitol and were overpowered, and where he almost died. So the fact that the Republicans keep trying to push this back, I'm not 100% optimistic, but I'm hopeful.
Okay, Thaddeus, Mike says it depends. How do you think this January 6th Select Committee is going to affect America in the long run?
Well, I'm going to advertise for the same kind of protective underwear. I say if the investigation can put some significant players behind bars and can move closer to a reasoned and irrefutable guilty verdict against Trump himself so as to attenuate his influence below its current temperature, all before the midterms, we may have a shot at resuscitating our democracy. I got to say, I believe that the influence of Trump over the Republican Party and with it tens of millions of voters is probably the greatest threat to our democracy, and getting him down off of his pedestal is something that needs to be done. Otherwise, if we just take him, have a quick monkey trial and throw him in jail, we will have a shooting war, because those millions of people who adore him will want to go and defend him. So his influence needs to be drawn down. If Trump holds his current level of thrall over all of those voters, we may be in for a very long period of contention. And note, I'm not saying that I'm ringing the death knell for democracy. And all I can say for my hopes for that is there will be other generations after us.
Okay, Pat, Thaddeus seems to think that if there ends up being some jail coming for certain people coming out of this investigation, I kind of think that that's more in line with the Justice Department than Congress. But what do you think this particular investigation is going to produce as far as America's legacy?
Well, I think, I'm pretty confident they're going to find all kinds of stuff that went on, just in the looks at the pieces that are out there. I think really one of the things that Democrats especially, but people of good faith have had difficulty with is the whole messaging piece. I think that one of the reasons that Trump is so powerful is that his message is so resonant, and the Republicans have been doing that forever. Otherwise, for example, why would school board candidates in Matsu Borough be talking about critical race theory? I mean, the messaging that comes out that has nothing to do with anything to do with whatever they're doing, that messaging, we need to figure out how to message about this in a way that is going to grab people's attention. It's got to be short and sweet and, lock him up. I don't know. I don't know the answer to it, but I wish I did, because I would be doing it right now. But I think that's going to be part of the way people understand how this is affecting democracy.